Opposed? No. Perfect. Right, we have item 10. We have Ryan on the submission of potential changes to the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. I think Councillor Sayers. I'll just get Councillor Sayers because he did have some questions on this.
I'm happy to move, Chair. Happy to move that one.
Councillor Darby, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Foley. But I think there are some, if you want to go through this presentation, I think it's important, and then we'll go to a question from Councillor Sayers if he still has it on this specific.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Ryan Bradley, I'm from the Plans and Places team, and I've got with me Danny Quinto, who's from the REMU team, who's our soil scientist. So if there's any technical questions on this, I can defer to Danny.
You're welcome to come up, Danny, if you'd like to, but you don't have to.
So this item is basically coming back from the October meeting. So in October, the committee sought that a draft of the submission be brought back. So this is what we've got today, a draft, which is in appendix or attachment A. And so what we're going to cover, this will be a brief presentation. We'll just look at which section of the MPS on highly productive land is under review and what it currently says, what then are the potential changes that are proposed, and then what our draft submission says. So the section that has been proposed to be changed or potentially changed is around land use and development on highly productive land. So this is section 3. Or clause 3.9 of the National Policy Statement on Highly Productive Land. And so this is around land use only, so it's not to do with subdivision, not to do with rezoning, just land use. So what the current policy or clause says is that you must avoid inappropriate use and development of highly productive land. And it says that land-based primary production is an appropriate activity, and basically everything else is inappropriate unless it's on the list of exceptions that follows. So the list of exceptions there, I won't go through them, but it looks like it's a long list, but they're actually very specific, and there's actually very few avenues to get activities through that list if you're not on there. So the potential changes that the government is seeking feedback on to the National Policy Statement. Basically, there's been feedback from some stakeholders that that list of exceptions too narrow, and they want, so the proposal from the Ministry for the Environment is to expand that list and add 2 new things. The first one is new infrastructure, and I talked about this in October at the meeting, but basically when you boil it down, it really comes down to solar farms. That's what's been opened up. It's aimed at allowing new solar farms to locate on highly productive land. And the second change is around intensive indoor primary production, which is another way of saying poultry farms, piggeries, that sort of thing. This is farming that occurs in buildings, doesn't rely on the soil, and also greenhouses, but that's only greenhouses that don't rely on the soil. So if a greenhouse is relying on the soil, that's fine, but it's the ones that are set up and have concrete floors and so on and don't use the soil at all. So the proposal is to add those to the exceptions list to enable them to be to locate on highly productive land. So a very quick overview of the council submission. There's a lot of detail in the report and the draft submission on all these points. And just bear in mind, we did have feedback from local boards, iwi, and the Rural Advisory Panel, and that was all considered in drafting up this submission. And that feedback's also appended to the end of the council submission as well, so that will go into the Ministry for the Environment. And since the agenda was published, we've also had feedback from the Albert Eden local board, and that will also be attached to the final submission that we send through. So what our submission says, the draft submission, does not support the potential changes around specified infrastructure, which again, really we're talking about solar farms specifically. And that's because, first of all, we don't think it's necessary. We don't need to sacrifice our highly productive land to achieve New Zealand's 100% renewable energy goals. There are other ways to meet those goals. Solar farms will always result in significant losses to production on highly productive land. You can do sheep grazing and so on, but you're never going to be able to do what you could do if the solar panels weren't there. Auckland could be disproportionately impacted by solar panels and solar farms. Auckland's an attractive place to locate these things, and currently in terms of applications and pre-applications, there's about 2,000 hectares that, if they were all to go ahead, could potentially be in solar farms, and most of that would be on highly productive land, and that's in Auckland. Solar farms also don't need to locate on highly productive land. They do have other options about where they could locate. Most infrastructure doesn't need this change, so it hasn't been asked for by transport agencies or water agencies or anything. This is really quite a specific targeted change that is benefiting solar farm developers. And also, one of the reasons that the Ministry of Environment gave was about cyclone recovery infrastructure and providing infrastructure at pace. But we think there are better ways, that if that's the rationale for it, there's better ways they could do it than this. And then the second point around intensive farming and greenhouses, the draft submission does not support adding these to the list of exceptions. And that's because, firstly, they don't use the soil, so they basically permanently consume it, much like an urban use would do on the same land. They don't need to be located on highly productive land because they don't use the soil, but they do need to be close to markets, labour, transport and supporting infrastructure. But most of Auckland's rural land is close to those things as well, not just the highly productive land. So there are other options. There's also alternative areas of relatively flat land that could be used for these activities. So most of Auckland's flat land is not highly productive land. And then there's also the broad, and that's because obviously earthworks and so on, you don't want to locate them on steeper slopes, but there is a lot of flat land in Auckland they could locate on. And then there's the broader argument around industrial scale farming and buildings that don't use the soil. Where would they go in the long term? And there's potentially options for them to go in urban areas as well. This change is not urgently needed in Auckland. We don't have a high number of consents for these things, unlike the solar farms, which we do have a whole lot of demand for. This is not an urgent change in Auckland because it's not something that we do get a whole lot of development coming in each year. Highly productive land is not a great place to relocate activities like greenhouses and intensive farms due to climate change, and this again is one of the reasons put forward by the Ministry for the Environment. That's because 40% of our highly productive land is within floodplains or a coastal inundation area, so it's not a great place to try to get out of those things. Many types of farming needs highly productive land. We can't, not all types of things can be produced in glass houses or buildings. And finally, it makes it difficult for the council with their consenting. So if this was to get through, the council would potentially have a difficult time under an effects-based planning regime to grant one activity for a large-scale industrial building that doesn't use the soil, like a greenhouse or a poultry farm, and then decline another large industrial building that doesn't use the soil that's used for a logistics warehouse or something else like that. So it would make it difficult for the council when we come to consenting. So those are the key reasons, and there's obviously a lot more detail in the submission, and happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Danny. I think it's very clear, very thorough. Support the direction. Do we have any questions? Councillor Baker.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And yeah, good work. Just in terms of the Rural Advisory Panel, I guess they quite an in-depth and detailed, I guess, submission back. Obviously, they agreed in regards to our stance with solar farms. There was a little bit of point of difference with the greenhouses and things, and the how have we discounted that? It seems that we have. Why is that? Because they came up with some possible solutions that could have been incorporated into our feedback.
Yes, essentially that was all considered, and so was all the other feedback we got from local boards. Not all of it is aligned with what the final council submission is, and that's because we went through the whole thing of looking at all the rationale behind it, and basically the reasons that I've just explained are the reasons why we've decided to, in the draft submission which you're going to vote on, to not support these changes. But you've got in your the submission appended to it, you do have the Rural Advisory Panel's view on things, so you're welcome to read that and vote on that as well.
Kia ora, Ryan. Sorry, Councillor Sayers, I did say you were first and left you off. Councillor Sayers, sorry.
No trouble, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you're here, Ryan. I was just curious with the local board feedback. Have you got that at your fingertips for Rodney? Yeah, just because it was a wee while ago that they sent in their feedback, they wanted me to represent their voice today in terms of the feedback that they've given, Ryan, just to make sure that their concerns have been addressed. To me, it sounds like they have been, but just confirming that on their behalf. And also clause the B there, the central government comment.
Yeah, so in terms of clause A, their views are basically reflected in the council submission. Clause B, they've requested that central government reconsider rezoning highly productive land in the future urban and countryside living areas of Auckland back to rural production. So that's quite outside what we're submitting on here. And it's basically a decision that the council would need to make if we wanted to do that. That's kind of outside what we're talking about today, though.
Yep, no, I appreciate the answers. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. And their their views on that will be part of the submission, but won't be part of our council submission, if you know what I mean. Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a couple of questions. We've got a rural production zone, have we? Yeah.
Yes.
So does this affect us at all? Because I'm just thinking that things that are on concrete that often go really well in good productive areas, and I don't like losing productive soil, but pack houses and things like that are often really well placed to be right in the middle of those areas there, and they have concrete floors, obviously, but they do use up. Does this have any impact on that adversely? Because conversely, pack houses and, say, milk production plants don't fit very well in commercial areas either.
So on the list of exceptions at the moment, there is one called supporting activity. So that's where you could put in, ancillary buildings and things that would be supporting the rural production activity on the site. So things like pack houses and things could potentially come under that exception there.
They'll still be okay to go. I mean, I don't consider them to be a loss of production of our soils. They are kind of supporting it.
Yes, so as long as it's supporting the activity, then yes, it's enabled, and that's not changed through this.
Yeah, that's good, because they don't actually fit very well in commercial areas like Glenbrook, like what's the name, Brook, because they're 24-hour things and those areas aren't. Okay, well, that's good then.
Kia ora, good question. Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions? Pretty straightforward. Thank you. Thank you both. We'll get you to step back and we will go to the debate. I think we had a mover, Darby, seconder, Councillor Foley. Is there any debate on this?
I'd like
Councillor Sayers?
I'd like to make a comment in favour of the recommendation, and it's primarily based on the prediction of elite soils. We've lost far too much of our elite production soils to date already. Anything that we can do to further protect those should be fully endorsed, not only by us, but I believe that we'd have the full backing of Aucklanders. The food supply and other materials that we get from those areas are critical to our future generations as well as our supply needs right now. So that would be one of the primary reasons why I'm supporting the paper, and I thank the officers, and I'll be voting in favour. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. My only brief comment, which is maybe a bit of not serious, but I think that the solar providers should be talking first to the supermarkets and malls and Bunnings and everyone else first to put solar arrays across all their car parks before they go to the highly productive soils. I'm not sure if that's able to happen, but it would be a good place to start, in my opinion. Right, all those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? Perfect, thank you. We'll move to item 11.